Welcome back. President Trump is again contradicting himself over the reason why he fired FBI Director Jim Comey. He tweeted this morning, quote, "Not that it matters, but I never fired James Comey because of Russia. The corrupt mainstream media loves to keep pushing that narrative, but they know it's not true." But here's the thing. That is not what Trump said in an exclusive interview with NBC's own Lester Holt last May.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
Russia, that gets me every time. That's also not what President Trump said the day after Jim Comey was fired, when he was in an Oval Office meeting with Russian officials. According to the New York Times, Trump told Russia's foreign minister and the Russian ambassador to the United States, quote, "I just fired the head of the FBI. I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's now taken off." Trump's tweet today is in reaction, of course, to a new development in the Russia investigation. The Times reporting that former acting FBI director Andrew McCabe wrote a secret memo about Comey's firing and turned it over to Mueller, fearing there was a cover story behind all of this happening, behind why exactly Jim Comey was fired. McCabe wrote that during a meeting at the DOJ last May, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein claimed the president asked him to reference Russia in Rosenstein's memo, which cited Comey's handling of the Clinton investigation as a reason for the firing. Joining me now, Daniel Goldman, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and my dear friend, attorney Midwin Charles. Daniel, just help me understand this. Like, besides Trump is playing to his base, like, in all sincerity, when Jim Comey got fired, we watched Trump surrogates go out there and give all sorts of Hillary Clinton explanations, and they humiliated his own team by going on Lester Holt and saying, yep, it was Russia. That's why I booted him. And now he's saying the reverse.
Look, yeah, he's trying to do some degree of damage control. Rudy Giuliani has been spouting all sorts of different reasons why Comey was fired as well over the last month or so that he's been representing him. And I think it's an effort to sort of muddy the waters in case a report or on the unlikely event of an indictment were to come down that, you know, there are all sorts of different reasons. He's the executive and the head of the executive branch. He can fire Jim Comey. And so the Russia thing might have been something. The Clinton investigation might have been something else. You know, all sorts of different reasons so that you can't actually pin an obstruction charge on him because there are too many reasons.
Sure, he is the commander-in-chief. He can fire whomever he wants. But if I want to fire someone on my team who happens to be pursuing a suit against me for sexual harassment, it's kind of an issue. So what does this mean for Rod Rosenstein?
Well, I think what it means for Rod Rosenstein is that he knows exactly what's happening. Remember, Rod Rosenstein is the one who appointed Mueller over a year ago, May 17, 2017. So we've just come across the one-year anniversary of doing this, and we now know that his investigation has expanded. So not only is he looking at whether or not Russia had a role in electing Donald Trump in 2016, but we now know that his investigation has also expanded into whether or not Donald Trump has obstructed justice with respect to this. So I think Rod Rosenstein is playing this very carefully. I think he understands what's at stake. I think we all can agree that this is now all unprecedented in terms of how all of this has played out to date.
But now that he might possibly be a witness for Mueller, can he still do his job?
So what this tells me is that Donald Trump nor anyone else is going to be charged with obstruction of justice, because if Rod Rosenstein is as much of a witness to the firing of Jim Comey as the McCabe memos now indicate that he was, there's no way that he can be involved in making a charging decision to indict someone based on an investigation in which he's a witness. So reading tea leaves here, I think what this is an indication of is, and the reason he has not recused himself yet, is because they're not at the point, at a minimum, they're not at the point where they're making a charging decision, and I think it's unlikely that they will actually indict anyone on the obstruction charge, because otherwise Rosenstein would have to recuse himself.
Ooh, all right, we got to turn to Avenatti. because this is another case involving the president, Michael Cohen, and current adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Her attorney, everyone knows him, he's a media star, Michael Avenatti, talked with our colleague Ari Melber last night about the Trump tapes, how Michael Cohen may have recordings of President Trump speaking about this. Take a listen.
You're calling these the Trump tapes. That is very interesting. That is very exciting. But you don't, in fact, know whether Donald Trump is or is not on any of these tapes yet.
Well, I know for a fact that Donald Trump is on at least one of these recordings, Ari. I'm not going to get into
How do you know that?
I'm not going to get into the details of how I know that, Ari.
But would you say that in court?
Absolutely.
So you're saying as a matter of fact, you know that at least in one occasion he is on the tape?
Yes.
And you know that because you've heard that tape?
I'm not going to get into
Because if you haven't heard that tape, do you really know that, or do you just think that because someone told you that?
Let me answer your question, okay? On at least one of these recordings, Donald Trump is on one of the recordings, at least one of them. I know that for a fact. I stand behind it. I think if you look at my track record over the last almost 3 months, it's impeccable relating to representation.
Would you describe that as something you have personal knowledge of?
Yes.
What's going on here?
Well, we know Michael Cohen, or at least we've heard Michael Cohen had a habit of recording conversations that he was on. And we heard right when the searches occurred that there were recordings, but that there were rumblings that he never actually recorded conversations with Donald Trump. If, in fact, there is a recording with Donald Trump, we then get into attorney-client privilege land. And so it's unclear whether that would ever be turned over anyway. It would depend a little bit on whether or not it related to the Stormy Daniels case, or if it related to something completely unrelated to Cohen's legal representation of Trump on any number of different things. It would obviously be very interesting to learn that, but I think there are many steps that we need to go through before we get there.
Before we go, can you just speak to how Avenatti is playing his hand? The judge reprimanded him yesterday and said, enough with this media tour. Avenatti has been on TV this year 200 times as it relates to the Stormy Daniels case. And on one hand, we often say, this guy has hurt Trump more than the Democrats have. Right. At this point, is he hurting his own case, or at least in the eyes of this judge?
Well, I don't believe so. Remember, Avenatti's #1 job is to represent his client. It is to do that zealously. And while he may and a lot of times as attorneys, and I do this all the time, when I represent my client, sometimes the judge doesn't like what it is that I have to do in order to do the best job possible. So oftentimes, the #1 goal here is for him to represent the client. And if it may tick off a judge every now and then, that's just part of the game.
Everybody's got different priorities. Everyone has different stakeholders. Daniel Midwin, thank you so much. Next.